"Divorce me now. I'm sick of this child-centered life," Mike exclaimed. That I had changed since we got married, showing his discontent. "But it's only natural for one's behavior to shift from being a lover to a spouse," I retorted. "All right, but you'll regret this," he cheered, probably only imagining scenarios that suited him. I looked at Mike, blissfully happy, with a cold gaze. "My name is Emily Johnson, 32 years old. I've been married for 2 years and had a child, but it's far from a happy life. My husband, Mike, doesn't help at all with childcare or even household chores. I'm currently on maternity leave, so I manage both childcare and household duties alone. But my maternity leave is about to end in about 3 months. If I go back to work like this, I might just collapse from overwork. I've repeatedly asked Mike for help with childcare and household chores, but he acts like it's none of his business and insists I should do it all alone. The lack of concern from my husband, who doesn't even care that I'm exhausted, has made me feel increasingly anxious about our future. Mike and I used to work at the same company and ended up in the same department. When I was transferred, he's only 2 years older, but I admired Mike, my bright and confident boss. As we worked together, I found myself increasingly drawn to him, and it seemed he felt the same way, as he confessed his feelings, and we started dating. Our relationship went well, and we eventually got married. But after marriage, I began to feel uneasy about Mike's attitude and actions. Things I didn't mind during our dating phase started to bother me. Mike often prioritized himself without considering me. He used to keep in touch regularly, treated me to meals, and gave me presents. I felt well cared for. But after getting married, his attitude towards me seemed to become more casual. Living together made this even clearer. We hadn't lived together before getting married, and I regretted not doing so. I thought we could resolve issues through discussion, but that was too optimistic. I had heard stories about married life from my parents and my sister, who was already married with children. I believed marriage was about helping each other. However, Mike wouldn't help me, even when I was in trouble. We initially shared household chores as we both worked, but he gradually started making excuses to push them onto me. I knew his job was tough, and at first I was happy to be relied on. But now, when I refuse, he complains, saying, "I'm more tired than you. I earn more. As the wife, you should be doing the housework." Knowing that I also work, he began insisting that housework is a woman's job. He also started prioritizing hanging out with friends or his hobbies over plans with me. I hoped things would change once we had a child, but even when I was pregnant and couldn't move due to morning sickness, he showed no concern. When I called, he quickly hung up, saying he had a drinking party. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days, but when I returned home with our child, he complained about my hospital stay. Childbirth is just about giving birth. You're exaggerating by staying in the hospital for 3 days. Don't slack off on the housework from now on, he said. I felt a headache trying to understand why he would think this way. Is his comfort more important than me or our child? Disappointed in Mike, I decided I should no longer expect anything from him, especially after he complained more about the birth of our child than celebrating it. After that, I took care of our child during my maternity leave, but Mike seemed uninterested in our baby. "Hey, you're a father now. Could you please take care of the child a bit?" I asked him. Despite my requests, Mike continued to go out and immerse himself in his hobbies, showing no interest in engaging with our child. "Really? I've been working and just got back, and now you're trying to dump the childcare on me," he retorted, even using earplugs to ignore the crying baby while he enjoyed gaming or reading. He wouldn't even help with the household chores. All he did was demand perfect housework and argue that childcare was a mother's job. It seemed Mike thought he didn't need to do anything at home, lacking awareness as both a husband and a father. Even though I was sleep-deprived from childcare, with dark circles under my eyes and utterly exhausted, Mike seemed oblivious. He always said he couldn't relax at home and would go out on his days off. The last time I remember going out carefree, like Mike was probably on our honeymoon. Despite being married, Mike still acted as if he were single. "Come on, just because you don't leave the house doesn't mean you can't keep yourself up. You look terrible." He even started mocking my appearance. He used to be considerate and kind about my health during our dating days, but now he didn't care at all. Angry at Mike for dumping everything on me and doing as he pleased, I was too tired to even express my anger. "If you think that way, why don't you help out more around the house?" I retorted wearily. But he only blamed me, saying it was my fault. I had thought he was wonderful when we were dating, but I never imagined he could be like this. Looking back, the Mike I once admired now seemed to have been just hiding his selfishness. Still, since we were married, I wanted Mike to be a proper parent. Hoping for this, I kept advising him. But my heart grew tired as Mike showed no willingness to change his ways. Then one day, Mike said he was going out to play with friends because it was his day off. "I'll be home for dinner. Don't slack off," he said, disregarding my exhausted state. "If you say that, then you should also help out with the house." "Don't make me repeat myself." "It's annoying," I replied. Despite telling him I was nonstop with childcare, he only said, "Don't be spoiled. You're on maternity leave." Resigned to yet another day like this, I was caught up in childcare and household chores, and in the evening, Mike returned home. At that time, I had just managed to put our child to sleep and was taking a break, exhausted from chronic sleep deprivation and the fatigue of childcare. I had fallen asleep near our child. That's when I heard Mike's yelling. "Hey, what are you slacking off for?" "Dinner isn't ready yet." His words, coming from someone who had just been enjoying leisure time, were the last thing I wanted to hear. Anger welled up inside me, but exhaustion and sleepiness won over, and I didn't retort. More concerning was that Mike's yelling might wake the baby. "Keep it down, will you? The baby will wake up," I said. But my words had no effect, as Mike had always just blamed me, even when our baby was crying loudly. Instead, my caution only made him more furious. "You've changed since we got married. Are you mocking me?" Mike complained, seemingly displeased that I prioritized our child over him to me. This was obvious as we were now parents. The problem, I thought, was Mike, who hadn't changed since before our marriage and hadn't fully embraced being a parent. "Of course, I'll prioritize the child. They're your child too. Why aren't you more interested?" I retorted, my irritation growing. This made Mike even more angry. "Divorce me now. I'm sick of this child-centered life." "All right, but don't regret this," I agreed without hesitation, tired of a life where having a husband meant being blamed rather than helped. Yes, Mike seemed pleased that I agreed to the divorce, but it definitely wouldn't go the way he imagined. "Then get out of my house quickly," he said with a smirk, probably thinking I'd be troubled or that I'd beg him to reconsider. He might have thought that I would come back begging to revoke the divorce, believing that Mike would regret this in the future. I quickly packed my belongings and quietly left the house. 3 days after leaving, I found a sense of relief in a life without Mike. Childcare was still hard, but his presence had been a source of stress. During this calm period, Mike called me. "Hey, you've caused a huge mess here. Take responsibility." He yelled. "What's the rush?" I calmly replied, "Angrier now." Mike vented about what happened since I left. Mike was having an affair with his high school ex-girlfriend, Sarah Thompson, at the same company, and it had been discovered, leading to condemnation from colleagues. His work was suffering because of this, and Sarah had even dumped him. Moreover, Sarah's husband was threatening to demand alimony for the affair. As a result, Sarah, not wanting to pay alimony, blamed the affair on Mike and played the victim. We were both going to divorce and marry each other happily. "This is all your fault," Mike blamed me in a fit of misplaced anger. In response to Mike's outburst, I felt more astonishment than anger at being cheated on and remained calm. I had known about Sarah, Mike's ex-girlfriend, since we were dating. Although we worked at the same company, we were in different departments, so I had only seen her from a distance and never talked to her. However, Mike often mentioned that he never expected to reunite with her at the company. Moreover, I had actually known about Mike's affair with Sarah since it began. The reason was that Sarah's husband, David Thompson, was a friend of mine. David and I had been close since elementary school, often playing together with other kids. We lost touch after moving on to different schools, but reconnected in college and rebuilt our friendship. When David told me he was getting married to Sarah, I was surprised and shared the news with Mike. I remember telling him about it while we were relaxing in the living room, but Mike, absorbed in the TV, probably forgot about it. It was during a time when I was exhausted from solo parenting that David contacted me, informing me of Mike's affair. We hadn't been in regular contact since we both got married, so it was a surprise when he called. David asked about my current situation in a hesitant manner. "I just had a baby, but my husband hardly participates in childcare," I said, puzzled, while inadvertently expressing my exhaustion and disappointment in Mike. Sensing my fatigue and resignation, David hesitantly revealed the affair. "It's hard to say, but my wife has been cheating on me, and after some digging, I found out it's with your husband, Mike." I was informed of Mike's affair for the first time, but instead of shock, I felt a sense of understanding, and my heart remained calm. Mike, who showed no interest in our child and lacked any intention of protecting our family, wouldn't surprise me by having an affair. In fact, I quietly reflected on my lack of judgment. "I see. Now that you mention it, it does make sense," I replied, unshaken, and thanked David for letting me know. Until then, I had felt obliged to try to fix things with Mike as we were married, despite his terrible attitude as a husband. But knowing about the affair, I realized that I no longer needed to struggle with that conflict. David then asked for my help in gathering evidence of the affair. He wanted to collect solid proof to corner them beyond any denial. Feeling angry towards Mike, I agreed with David's plan and decided to cooperate, though I had my reservations. "How can I help with gathering evidence? I can't move around much with a baby," I expressed my concerns, considering the need to continue with childcare and household duties without arousing Mike's suspicion. With my recent exhaustion, I wondered if there was anything I could do. "We'll handle the necessary procedures. It would be helpful if you could just share any usual behaviors or patterns of Mike." After discussing, we decided to split the expenses for the investigation, and that I would inform him of Mike's comings and goings. So now, hearing that Mike was in trouble, I could only think that it was his own doing, just so you know. "I'll also be demanding alimony from you and your mistress," I calmly retorted to Mike, who had brazenly admitted to his affair. "What? No, it's just suspicion." "There's nothing real about it." Mike tried to backpedal, seemingly trying to calm down after my words. "Have you forgotten what you just said? You admitted to having an affair, and we have evidence," I replied, dismayed at Mike's incoherent argument. "What? You recorded this call?" Mike panicked, wondering if this phone conversation would become evidence. But I hadn't recorded this call. When I told him that, Mike seemed relieved and began to get defensive, his tone turning triumphant. "It's not my fault. You're the one who's wrong, trying to push childcare and housework onto me when I'm tired from work." Mike tried to paint me as the villain. I had sought appropriate spousal support from Mike, since we became a couple. But he clearly disliked that. Perhaps Mike just wasn't suited for marriage. This thought made me tired and almost ready to sigh at my own lack of judgment. Yet his verbal abuse towards me continued unabated. "It's all your fault that I've suffered so much. Just divorce me and give me alimony," Mike began demanding, claiming that the misery of our marriage was my fault and that he should receive alimony. At this point, I just wanted to get the divorce over with quickly. Arguing back and forth with Mike was becoming too exhausting. I decided. "Then send me the completed divorce papers. Once you do, I'll take them to the office," I said, wanting to be ready for the divorce at any moment. Though the alimony procedures were not urgent, when I asked Mike to mail the divorce papers, he seemed confused. "What? Where are you now?" he asked. "I'm at my parents' house," I answered him. It was obvious that the only place I could go with a baby would be my parents' house. "At your parents' house? Then your parents will know about the divorce," he exclaimed, probably worried about his reputation, especially since his affair at work had already caused him trouble. It made me even more exasperated to think that if he was so worried about it getting out, he shouldn't have had an affair in the first place. "If you think you've done nothing wrong, there's no problem, right?" I suggested, trying to move things forward. "I don't want to drag out the divorce process. Let's have a proper discussion with both our parents present," I proposed. I didn't want to keep facing Mike, who had been unreasonably angry and uncommunicative. To avoid any future complaints or accusations, I suggested having a discussion with both sets of parents present as witnesses. "Why do we have to go through all that trouble?" Of course, Mike was against it. "Well, since I have evidence of your affair, I'll be sure to demand alimony and child support," I warned him. "What? I don't have any money to give you. Child support is just an excuse for you to live comfortably. I won't pay a dime." Mike refused to acknowledge his wrongdoing and was adamant about not losing any money, insisting he would make me pay him alimony in any settlement. This led to the decision to have a discussion with both our parents involved. On the day of the discussion, I left our child with my sister and went to my in-laws' house. Mike likely told his parents lies to portray himself as the victim. Anticipating this, I prepared effectively to convey the facts. As we took our seats, Mike predictably began playing the victim. "I can't take this marriage anymore. I come home from work and you dump all the childcare and housework on me. And to top it off, you've been cheating on me," Mike passionately asserted. I couldn't help but be impressed by his audacity. After all, it was Mike who was relaxing at home while pushing all the childcare and household chores onto me, even neglecting the family to go out and have fun. His performance was so convincing. Anyone unaware of the truth might have been easily fooled. But that's not the story I heard from our daughter. "Are you really the one who was doing all the childcare and housework?" Mike's portrayal of himself as the victim left my father bewildered and seeking confirmation. "Yes, that's right." And when I asked for help because I was tired, she complained. "I've wondered so many times about her character." Mike continued, seizing the opportunity to criticize my supposed bad attitude. But in reality, it was Mike who complained about my handling of both childcare and housework on my own. Listening to him twist the truth so boldly, I remained silent. After Mike had finished saying what he wanted, the atmosphere became uncomfortably tense. That's when I decided to fight back, pulling out a voice recorder. "Ladies and gentlemen, please listen to this." I played the recording which captured our daily life. In it, Mike could be heard using foul language towards me when I asked for help, and saying childcare and housework were a woman's job. "Hey, stop that." Mike panicked, but my in-laws held him back. I then presented photos as evidence of Mike's infidelity. They showed Mike and Sarah, arms linked in situations that clearly weren't just friendly. "What is this? Did you take these photos secretly?" Mike, his face red with anger, slammed his fist on the table and stood up. "So, you admit to the affair?" I retorted swiftly to Mike's accusation of secretly taking photos. Surprised by my response, Mike hurriedly began making excuses. "No, it's not like that. These photos aren't real. You must have fabricated them to suit your narrative." Despite being scolded by his parents, Mike refused to admit his infidelity, continuing to mutter excuses. Disgusted by his behavior, I played another recording. This one captured Mike and Sarah speaking ill of me and David, discussing their plans to divorce and remarry. "I married a wealthy man who listens to me, but I prefer you, Mike. David's just a boring guy. My wife's always nagging, and she doesn't care about me. I should never have married her." Mike laughed mockingly. Their parents, listening to this, glared at Mike with anger in their eyes. "How could you do this while having a family?" Mike, intimidated by his father's commanding presence, shrank back with a whimper. My father-in-law, a police officer with a strong physique, added an imposing tone to his angry voice and demeanor, given his profession. This time, he seemed particularly furious. Desperate to escape the intimidating presence of my father-in-law, Mike turned to me, clinging for support. "I understand. I was wrong. From now on, I won't push childcare and housework onto you, and I won't cheat. So please forgive me," Mike said, wanting to start over. But of course, I couldn't believe such words. I'd often said that I've changed since we got married. But when we became a couple, I wanted us to help each other. Besides, it's normal for parents to prioritize their child when they have one. I explained to him in simple terms how tough it had been for me to handle childcare and housework all by myself, and how I couldn't continue with someone who lacked parental responsibility. "I'll change my ways from now on," Mike said desperately, tears in his eyes, looking at me as if pleading for forgiveness. With tears in my eyes, I quietly exhaled and looked straight at Mike. "Yes, well then let's get a divorce," I said. "What? Why?" Mike seemed surprised, as he had probably never expected that I would consider divorce based on the warnings I had given during our marriage. He must have had quite an optimistic view, thinking I still wanted to be with him. Furthermore, even though he appeared to be remorseful now, I knew he would just repeat the same mistakes. Despite my countless requests in the past, Mike had always ignored them and blamed me. I had lost all trust in Mike by this point. "Why? I still love you, don't I?" "I won't agree to a divorce," Mike protested, but everyone present silently condemned him. "After hurting our precious daughter like this, do you think we'll forgive you? We won't entrust her to someone who won't protect her. We won't have anything to do with you anymore." My parents spoke calmly, but their words were filled with not just anger, but also disappointment. In fact, I had put the call with Mike on speaker before answering, despite having asked my parents not to intervene. Upon hearing Mike's accusations and blaming tone, my parents became furious and were adamant about not forgiving him. Since my parents were also a working couple who shared childcare and housework responsibilities, they seemed to despise Mike even more for pushing all household responsibilities onto me. Nevertheless, Mike attempted to cling to us, which only fueled my father-in-law's anger. Following my mother-in-law's guidance, we left my in-law's house. "I'm truly sorry, although an apology can't make up for everything, Emily. He's caused you so much trouble," my mother-in-law said with a sense of remorse. She had been a homemaker, so she seemed apologetic for endorsing the idea that a woman should solely take care of household chores due to her upbringing. However, it's not normal to demean women with such statements. Clearly, it was an issue with Mike individually, not my in-laws. "You did nothing wrong. You cared about me and helped me a lot. Please don't blame yourself," I reassured her. I didn't hold my in-laws responsible for the situation, so I said that to my mother-in-law and left their home. Afterward, through a lawyer, I claimed compensation from Mike and Sarah. The evidence of their affair was solid, so the amount was quite substantial. Furthermore, I demanded child support from Mike. He resisted, but my in-laws wouldn't allow it. As a result, both the compensation and child support were paid as required. Additionally, it seems that both of them were caught misusing company resources, not just having an affair at work. After Mike and I started working at different places following our marriage, he frequently met Sarah within the company. They escalated their activities, believing they wouldn't get caught. However, their affair was recorded on the company's surveillance cameras. Consequently, both of them were dismissed from their jobs. Since Mike was living in company housing, he was evicted and tried to rely on his parents. But his angry in-laws wouldn't allow it. Now, he's struggling to make ends meet, paying for his living expenses, compensation, and child support all on his own. I heard that Sarah too was evicted from her home and couldn't rely on her parents, leading to a difficult life. Considering how they had belittled and indulged themselves at the expense of others in the past, I believed they were getting their just deserts. As for me, with the support of my parents, I'm diligently raising my child. I no longer have to do everything on my own. So although parenting is challenging, I have more mental room to breathe. I can sleep well at night now, and the dark circles under my eyes have disappeared. David, too, is leading a peaceful life after the divorce. Initially, I had a favorable view of Mike, but when I look back, I realized he was confident but selfish, and the signs of this outcome were there while reflecting on my poor judgment. I want to do my best to ensure our child grows up healthy and happy.